Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to part 2 of the NWHL playoff special with Olivia Giardetti, Brandon Cassidy, alongside Thomas West, my fellow commentators for today's show.
The following is a presentation of Fan Media Network.
For today's show, guys, what a show we had in part 1. Olivia, let's just kind of go over here real quick. Grant Mentis for the Toronto Six. She's got to be one of their top players.
Yeah, as mentioned, she's leading the league, tied with somebody on Boston, which is quite interesting because the two of them will be facing off this Friday. But both Grant Mentis and Kaylee Fratkin are the two players that I'm going to be watching out for sure. They're both at the top of the league, and they're two outstanding players. So it's going to be interesting to see those two go head to head and see whose team comes out for the win.
It's definitely going to be an intense matchup. Now, Thomas, those two teams are going to be are in part 1. Part 2, though, these two teams are in a matchup where it's Connecticut versus Minnesota, and Connecticut is David versus Goliath here.
Yeah, it is. That's actually a good way to put it, because I think Boston, Toronto, we still kind of think in the back of our mind that Boston may be the better team than Toronto. I personally don't think that, but it's definitely possible. In this matchup, it's not. It's the Minnesota Whitecaps are definitely the more strong team right now. There's been a lot of problems offensively, I think, for the Connecticut WHALE and the Minnesota Whitecaps. You know, they finished second in the league, and I don't even think that they were really playing up to their potential. Mm-hmm. So this is a team that could definitely go to the finals, and you know, if they lose to the Connecticut WHALE, it's a massive upset. Olivia, we'll get your thoughts on this as well. The Connecticut WHALE, probably a pretty major underdog here.
Yeah, there's lots of statistics about the WHALE that are not leading in the right direction. So they only played 4 games in the bubble, which is the least amount of games that have been played by any of the teams that will be playing this weekend. They had 2 wins and 2 losses, which isn't awful. It's a 50-50, but their special teams is definitely an area where I think that their opponent will be able to capitalize on. Their power play percentage is 9%, and then their penalty kill percentage is 77. So there's definitely going to be some areas there where they will have to pick up some slack, I think, based on what they were doing in the bubble. But one thing is, it was very hard for teams to get on the power play because of how little penalty minutes they give up. So they still have some impressive names on their roster, but this team has not done a lot to show for it. I don't think they should be taken lightly.
Yeah, the favorite really can't be denied. I mean, the Minnesota Whitecaps have been playing phenomenal hockey of late, but never say never. I think that one of the biggest things that sports has taught us, if anything, is that you never say die. You never count out the underdogs, because everyone loves an underdog story. And Thomas, especially when it comes to the offensive side of the puck, I mean, like there's a couple of players. Olivia, I'd actually really like to know your thoughts on who we should watch in terms of the Connecticut WHALE, who we should watch on that team to really bring some prominence in terms of offense and maybe a couple of points.
Tori Howard is the first name that comes to mind. She actually is from a small town outside of Ontario. And this is her first season in the NWHL, but she was a captain at the University of New Hampshire very recently, and she has represented Ontario at many events, Team Canada also, so she clearly has what it takes, one would say. She has an amazing shot, and she is very tall, which helps on the blue line, which I do think that she's going to have some points coming her way for sure. She already has 3. In the 4 games that they played, but I do expect to see more from her. And then another one is Emma Vlasic. This is her second season, but she had 3 assists in 2 games from the 2019-2020 season, the playoffs, sorry. So I expect her to come out and bring the same kind of energy.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the team that the Connecticut WHALE are facing in the Minnesota Whitecaps. We talk about how strong this team is. They're fast. They got some fantastic forwards, some good goaltending as well. Olivia, what are your thoughts on the Minnesota Whitecaps, and how are they realistically stacking up?
So the Whitecaps also only played 4 games in the bubble. They had 3 wins and 1 loss, which is the better record. But they were able with that record to secure the 2nd spot in this playoff matchup. So they have a very impressive power play percentage at 26%, which is the highest in the league. And I do think that their opponents need to be very careful not taking penalties against the Whitecaps, because they will capitalize. They have an impressive, very impressive roster. And I do think that this matchup is leaning more towards one way, but who knows? We might be surprised.
Yeah, it's going to be a great matchup between these two teams. I think, yes, the underdog story. Yeah, I mean, the international competition is going to count for quite a bit of dressing room, I'd suggest, experience to calm her team down and to talk them up. But I do think that. Olivia, actually, that's something that I'd like to bring up to you. Physicality in women's hockey is not absent. It's very much prominent. It's very much there. I mean, having a bigger body on the ice, that can't hurt the Connecticut WHALE's chances in terms of being able to move bodies from front of the net.
I would agree with you that it is there, but I would say that it could be there more.
Okay.
That is one thing that I personally would kill to be able to do. Not literally. So being able to go out there and just not care about where your body's going and lay out people if you need to. The NWHL is more lax on the physicality based on what I'm used to in youth sports. But I think that's the same with when you look at the international competitions and the Olympics and all that kind of stuff. They do let more go. As we aren't going in there and doing body checks and all that kind of stuff, but it is nice to actually see hockey be played out and refs just let it go, because I do think that adds to the momentum of the game, and it only makes it better. So
yeah, and you talked about as well about Tori Howard being a taller player on the ice. That could probably penalize her just for being a bigger body and taking out another player.
It's normally what happens with women's hockey. They look at size. If you're bigger than the girl that fell down, you're getting a penalty every single time. So
now looking forward in terms of the prominence of women's hockey and in the airwaves, as it were, Twitch has been the stream. And Thomas, I'd actually like your input on this. Twitch has been the streaming platform for the NWHL, but it's not the only one that's airing these games, is it?
No, NBCSN, they had a deal with the NWHL originally that they would broadcast, have a national broadcast for the NWHL. Unfortunately, right before that was supposed to happen, the NWHL got canceled, which it really sucks for them because they're no longer getting that national exposure where, they were getting quite a lot of viewership on Twitch. In fact, probably triple the numbers that they were getting, when they started streaming games on Twitch, which is fantastic, but there's nothing that beats the national broadcast. Fortunately, the NBCSN has continued that contract with the NWHL, and the 3 games that will be played on Friday, 2 on Friday and 1 on Saturday, are all going to be getting national exposure. So that is something that's really fantastic for the league in terms of just getting exposure and a national presence in the U.S.
Now, Olivia, you play at Ryerson University, and they stream every game at OUA.tv. How does it feel as an athlete knowing you're on camera, you are being filmed, you are being shown to the world to show off your talents, and there are younger girls watching and aspiring to be like you?
it feels good, although I'm sure you guys know there's not always crazy amounts of viewers that are watching. Normally when I think, I'm like, oh yes, my mom and my dad are watching me, which I think is pretty cool, especially for the players that are from Vancouver and New Brunswick and all over Canada. it's very cool for them that their families are able to watch the games, and I do think that a lot of them appreciate it very much. And not to toot our own horns, but Ryerson does have one of the best broadcasts, if not best. I would say in all of Canada, but I don't know.
We actually aren't allowed to win. We aren't allowed to win every year. We have to give somebody else the torch every other year. But they do. Ryerson does win every other year, so I totally agree. Now, Thomas, looking forward here for the NWHL. There's been some controversy going on here. Is this detracting from the playoffs? Is this able, or is the NWHL able to kind of move past this and really just kind of enjoy the sport instead of the politics of the sport?
Yeah, they absolutely are. And I think it's also fantastic that we're able to see NWHL hockey again. They definitely could have, laid down and, not continued the rest of this season because, they didn't last year. And it seemed even more likely that the Isabel Cup final would be played this year. But it's great because we have a bunch of really talented hockey players and a short season that, had a ton of viewership to it, mainly on Twitch. And we saw so many people tuning in for that. And you look at the matchup right now, especially the Connecticut WHALE and the Minnesota Whitecaps. You have teams like the Connecticut WHALE who, were not favored to really go anywhere at the beginning of the season. In fact, I was working on a show before. We think we had them last below the Buffalo Buttes. But, in such a short season, teams are able to develop these really cool stories. And, who knows, we might be seeing a team like the Connecticut WHALE in the finals who, in a regular season probably wouldn't have been able to get that far. So it's, showcasing some teams that you don't usually see. And, it's fantastic just for building up the drama of the NWHL season.
All right, well, we're near the broadcast ending here. Guys, let's get some predictions going here. Olivia, you mentioned beforehand in part one who your favorite was, but who do you take to win the whole thing, and who's going to be in the finals?
So, yeah, Toronto 6 is obviously my favorite team and who I want to win. Whereas who I think will win might be a different story. I do think that the matchup between Toronto and Boston is going to be very tight. I'm gonna say that Boston wins and goes to the finals.
Okay.
And then I'm also going to say that the Whitecaps also go to the finals as well. I think that why not? As much as I want the perfect story and the perfect ending, I'm gonna be a devil's advocate and see what happens.
So here's the thing with my answer. I have picked the Boston Pride on another show pretty much every single time, and I've lost because Boston has not had the season that we were expecting them to have. So I'm gonna change my answer here.
Oh.
I'm going to say the Toronto 6 are going to beat the Boston Pride in this one-game elimination, just because of their previous history. Last game, the Toronto 6 beat Boston 2-1, but I don't think the score is really indicative of the game. I'm not a big believer in the, having one line and just a couple players that, can carry a team, and that's
Right.
Boston this year.
Right.
I'm a big believer in Toronto's philosophy of, spreading out the wealth throughout all four lines. And I think that's really going to help against Boston because they're going to match up better on the lower lines, maybe not as much as the top lines, but I think that's going to be enough to get them past. And then, yeah, I'm totally with you there, Olivia. It's the Minnesota Whitecaps over the Connecticut WHALE. I think the only way Connecticut wins is if Abbie Ives has a fantastic game between the pipes. And then I'm going to take the Toronto 6 in the final over the Minnesota Whitecaps.
I hope you're right.
See, Thomas, you actually have my prediction as well. Toronto going through, Minnesota going through as well, and Toronto winning it all.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing how many of these predictions come through. I think that we'll be watching and seeing how our predictions do as well. So Olivia Giardetti, we really appreciate you hopping on. From Thomas West and Brandon Cassidy, the Fan Media Show, and we'll see you next time.
To host a fan show or appear as a fan on a fan show, simply create a profile on FanMedia's iOS app or website. Select your teams and make a short intro video on your phone. Show hosts, reporters, former players, and superfans can use our Get Verified feature and make an intro video as well, and our mobile newsroom staff will reach out.